Hello and welcome to our presentation. Our presentation is entitled Young Children's Experiences of Parental Deployment within an Australian Defence Force ADF Family, Building Research-Based Resources. The presenters, there's three presenters here. One is Marg Rogers, the other is Jo Bird, and myself, Ingrid Harrington. We're all from the University of New England in Armidale.
So in the research context, there was no actual previous research with children and their educators with Australian Defence Force families. The previous research had used a deficit psychological approach and relied on secondary data about how the children were faring when a parent deployed or when a parent was engaged in military activity or peacekeeping missions, and it always came through the parent. So my study was different in that it worked directly with young children, 2.5 to 5 years, and their parents and educators using a strengths-based, resilience-based approach. So since this study, there's been others done with regional education development liaison officers and school teachers, but not with the children themselves. So my PhD study used an adapted mosaic approach, and it also used a narrative approach. It used thematical and narrative analysis, and it used a sample of 17 children from 11 families, and 6 of those were chosen as case studies. So when I say mosaic research, it's looking at, it originally came from the disability sector with participants who were non-verbal, and then early childhood educators and educational researchers picked it up because the children, they realised, were also, many of them, unable to, say, fill in an online survey form or unable to speak in paragraphs. Some of them can, but some of them weren't quite up to that, and not necessarily write in a way that was answering the questions. So it was quickly adopted into the early childhood sector, and basically it involves having a lot of very small pieces of data, and then the small pieces of data you step back from and you can see a theme. So for example, in that picture you can see the eye, and then you take more and cross-sectional analysis and you look at triangulation with parents and educators, and then you can see more themes emerging, and you also check with the children themselves as research participants, step back and you can see the whole picture of the cat emerging. All right, so it involved children and civilian parents from 4 bases and 3 geographical states in Australia. It also, interestingly, included 1 parent who'd left the ADF, that was during the study, and also 1 that had lost a partner during combat. And so the next part is looking at the unexpected findings. So there were many findings and many themes that I'll talk about later, but the unexpected finding was that there was a lack of age and culturally appropriate resources for young children, and parents reported feeling isolated and alone because of this lack of support. The educators reported feeling unsupported to assist the children and to help understand the families, and both were trying to adapt primary school and US-based resources for these children. So after we got some funding, we created the Early Childhood Defence Programs Project, and we co-created with experts and stakeholders, and these included defence family researchers, members, and also educators, defence social workers, early childhood educators, and other educational researchers, psychological researchers, and legacy family workers and volunteers. So these were our sources of funding up the top there, and we were able to create 4 sets of resources that you can see there. They're modules, online modules for children, parents, educators, and family and social workers to better support young children from defence families. They have now been evaluated and have been released in September 2022, and they're all free and available to be used online. So how did that relate to my PhD? So I found that in my PhD study, that the children were experiencing ongoing frequent transitions in their home. So the parent would come and go and come and go. They'd do trainings, and then they'd go get the training, and then they'd be away. Then they'd come back into the household. Then they'd go away and deploy. Then they'd come home. If it was a very long deployment, they would also come in and out of the household on annual leave. And then there would be reunions, and then they would start the whole process again. And parents said that this really challenged the children, because there was just this back and forth all the time. And the younger the child, the harder it was for them to adapt.
Okay, so we developed different resources to support these transitions. So one of the modules is number 18, which is transitioning from defence to civilian life. So the resources included downloadable ebooks, they were printable. There was also read-along recordings, keyword signing recordings, and interactive apps. So the different activities that were throughout these resources included puzzles, puppets, sequencing activities, matching activities, board games, card games, and sight words. So these could be used both online and offline. So some of them were printable and families could use them over and over.
So another finding was family mobility, and family mobility is a feature of Defence Force life, and it's based on a belief that families can relocate whenever the ADF requires. So that model was sort of set up when there was a stay-at-home mum and there was no career for the mother, and her role was to be the homemaker and to also rear the children. So now that it's expected and often needed to have that second source of income, so this clashes with and creates a great deal of stress for the partner, who may or may not be female, but generally there's a lot more female partners than male, and it really impacts their careers, and it actually affects the family stress levels and access to protective factors, because they are constantly moving different states and different locations. So you can have a little read there of some of the observations of children when they were talking about all the relocations they had, and also about a mum who talked about the 8 postings that she had as she was raising her family.
Okay, so some of the resources to support family mobility was making their own story and PowerPoint. So things that they'll always remember as a way of remembering their past house, the past town, past preschool, all of those past things that children experience. Some families did a mind map where they could help children visualize change, such as relocating or the parent going on deployment and leaving from home. So we have information for both educators to support the children and parents, but also information that the families can use themselves.
Thanks, Jo. So another finding was family role adaptations and flexibility. The children and the non-deployed parent seemed to take on new roles during a parental absence of training and deployment. And these roles were often readjusted as the deployed parent moved in and out of the household. So you can see some pictures there of some of those new jobs that they were doing. And often the children found that they really enjoyed learning about how to do these new jobs and took great pride in it. Thanks, Jo.
Yeah, and so again, some of the stories and things that we have are interactives designed to improve the children's understanding of how they can support the other family members while a parent is away. And then there's the stories and the interactive activities. Sometimes the stories include some of the jobs that have to be done that, say, the deployed parent would normally do, and how the child takes that on.
So another finding was the children's own responses to parental deployment was something they experienced, and then the responses of other family members. So children's responses were physical, social, emotional, and cognitive, but they also experienced the responses of their siblings and their non-deployed parent. So children experienced responses of the deployed parent to varying degrees within the deployment cycle, either firsthand or through a variety of communication media. And here we've got some of the challenges that the families faced, and I'll give you a moment to read that.
Okay, so some of the resources about these responses included, again, the modules. So module 5, fostering children's language about parents working away, and understanding about military family life. The Waiting for Daddy, which is Rose's story, was also changed into an app that was downloadable, and also the story is downloadable. And it talks about her responses to her parents' deployment. Another one is, oh, by the way, my mum has PTS, which was Nathan's mother's responses to her own deployment.
Okay, so protective factors. Supportive relationships within the microsystem and the exosystem have a significant impact on family resilience in defence families. These relationships include family members, peers, extended families, family friends, educators, and community organisations. Support from the ADF directly and indirectly was also observed within the exosystem.
Yep, so there's lots of resources about protective factors and building children's resilience. So storybooks show children getting support from other family members and extended family while their parents are away. And modules demonstrate ways to identify and harness protective factors.
Right, so they also experience digital communication technology and other communication. So children stayed connected with the deployed parent through the varied use of digital communication technology. This improves children's skills and facilitates smoother reunions and reintegrations because the relationship was kept fresh with that use of technology. Communication helps families stay connected, but it could also, on the other hand, increase stress if too much information was shared, or if there were access issues or time differences as parents were deployed in other time zones.
Yep, so some of the resources highlighting communication between the child and the absent parent. So in Nick's story, My Colourful Kite, he uses messaging and phone calls to talk to his absent parent. And in Mary's alphabet slippery dip, it shows her video conferencing and sending and receiving parcels, which is often a common way for the deployed parent and children to keep in contact.
Family narratives, meta-narratives, and ritual and communication. So narratives were also used by the parents and also in the early childhood services to help the child understand what was happening when a parent was working away or deployed. These simple family narratives were also reinforced by family members and community members and the ADF itself. On the meta-narrative scale, there was that justification and service and sacrifice narrative that came through in the families quite strongly. And that meta-narrative was used by the ADF within the workplace and the Australian government and media, and at the community level as well. Acculturation was also prevalent in all areas of the family socio-ecological system, and some of this acculturation was achieved through the use of ritual, such as Remembrance Day and Anzac Day.
So the resources about meta-narratives included stories about We Remember, which is an Australian related story about Anzac Day and Remembrance Day. So it includes things that came out in Marg's PhD, that the American resources often had American uniforms and American planes and things like that. So this one is all Australian pictures and representations of the people that are there. Some of the interactives help children learn how to create and lay wreaths, understand the rituals and support veterans.
Thanks, Jo. So development of coping strategies, and the children also saw models of resilience within their own families. So children developed a range of skills in various areas, including self-soothing, caring for other family members and peers who were experiencing similar issues, engaging in new tasks and taking on extra responsibilities. They experienced communication and technology, responsiveness and role flexibility, memorising and playing with the family narrative. Children witnessed their parents, siblings and peers using various coping mechanisms during the deployment cycle. And sometimes these coping mechanisms and behaviours were copied and became internalised. And you can see there the story that 5-year-old Blake has written about some of these coping strategies that he used for himself.
Yep, so in the modules and resources for coping strategies and resilience, the modules give a lot of ideas and suggestions around things that families can do and also educators can do in various services. So some of the picture books explore ways to cope when a parent is away and how to stay connected, and also models resilience within a family where their mother has given her health in service. And parent books that work when a parent is absent, something that they can work on with the child before they go away, and always keep the relationship fresh with up-to-date photos and stories and rituals and things they like to do together.
Yeah, terrific, thank you.
The project has been fortunate to build on some current partnerships. One of them is the Open Arms partnership, and there is a strong partnership with Legacy, the club services and Legacy Australia, and $2 of every sale of each printed book goes to Legacy Australia, which is great. There's the family base that promotes the website. There's close working relationships between military life and defence kids, and currently working on a potential partnership with the Canadian Institute of Military and Veteran Health Research. And of course, we've got the Facebook and Twitter tags as well. So the next two slides basically cover the academic references that have been used to underpin the success of the project. I'll just give you a second to have a look at that. And that's the other page of references. So thank you very much for listening to our presentation. We hope you found it useful.